For decades, if you wanted a textbook example of a modern economic powerhouse, you point straight to Germany. It was a model of efficiency, stability, and just sheer industrial might. But lately, the gears of that powerful machine, well, they've started to grind. So what happens when the country that seemed to have all the answers suddenly faces a crisis of its own? To figure that out, we need to look at the two very different sides of Germany's economic story.
Right. So the story of Germany's economy today is like a tale of two completely different places. On the one hand, you have the Germany we all remember, Europe's undisputed leader, a global export champion, celebrated for being so careful with its money. But on the other hand, you have the Germany of right now, staring down the risk of recession, still reeling from a massive energy shock, and genuinely worried about the decline of its legendary industrial base.
And that really brings us to the core question, doesn't it? How on earth did a country that was the envy of the world find itself in such a tough spot? To understand that, we've got to go back to the beginning and see how Germany built this incredible economic machine in the first place.
So let's start by looking at the pillars that held up Germany's modern economic miracle. You see, back in the early 2000s, Germany was actually called the sick man of Europe, if you can believe it. But a series of really bold decisions completely turned its fortunes around.
The winning formula really came down to three key things. First, to deal with high unemployment, they launched the Agenda 2010 reforms, which made the labor market way more flexible. Second, they doubled down on what they do best, engineering amazing high-value goods like cars and machinery and selling them to the rest of the world. And third, they had this deep cultural commitment to fiscal discipline, known as the Schwarze Null, or Black Zero, which basically meant a policy of not taking on new debt.
And let me tell you, this formula worked spectacularly. To give you an idea, by the mid-2010s, Germany's trade surplus, that's the value of what it sold to the world versus what it bought, hit a staggering figure. We're talking record-breaking highs, according to IMF data from that time. It was a crystal-clear sign of just how dominant its manufacturing was.
The whole world took notice. The German model was praised everywhere for its stability and resilience, especially after the 2008 financial crisis. The thinking was, wow, Germany has created this near-perfect economic engine. It was seen as the model for everyone else to follow. But this is where the story takes a really unexpected turn. Because it turns out, the very design features that made the German engine so incredibly powerful also contained hidden vulnerabilities. The pillars of its success were slowly and kind of quietly becoming its greatest weaknesses.
Okay, let's start with strength number one. It's world-class manufacturing. Made in Germany is a global seal of quality for a reason, right? It represents incredible engineering and industrial skill.
But here's the catch. This amazing export machine became way too reliant on just a few big customers, especially China. So when China's economy starts to slow down, the German factory floor feels the chill almost immediately.
Now for the second strength, that famous commitment to balanced budgets. For years, Germany was praised for being so prudent with its money, avoiding the high debt you saw in other countries.
The downside? Well, while the government was balancing its books, it was kind of starving its own country of investment. It's a weird paradox, right? Germany was building some of the world's most advanced cars, but the very bridges and roads they drive on were starting to crumble, and its digital infrastructure fell way behind its peers.
And finally, strength number 3, which was really the fuel for the entire machine, access to cheap, reliable energy to power its huge industrial sector. For decades, this was a massive competitive advantage.
But that cheap energy came mainly from one place, Russian gas. This created a profound dependency that, overnight, turned into a massive liability. Suddenly, the on-off switch for Germany's entire industrial engine was in someone else's hands.
So let's take a look at how these hidden weaknesses actually show up in the data. Because when you look at the numbers, you can really see how these long-term issues suddenly became urgent crises. And by the way, if you're finding this breakdown helpful for understanding how these big economic decisions play out, taking just a second to like or subscribe really helps the channel bring more stories like this to you.
All right, take a look at this chart. That huge bar on the left, that shows you the gas imports from Russia before 2022. Now, look at the tiny little bar right next to it. That's what was left after the supply was cut. That sudden drop sent an energy price shockwave through the entire economy, and it forced industries and regular households to scramble for new and much more expensive sources. Now, let's look at trade. This chart shows where Germany's exports go, and you can see that a huge slice of that pie is headed to countries like China. And this isn't just some abstract number. A slowdown in the Chinese construction market can directly lead to job cuts at a German factory that makes machine parts. That's how connected it all is.
And what about that underinvestment we talked about? Well, this table compares public investment as a percentage of the economy. For years, Germany has consistently invested less in its own public infrastructure, we're talking roads, rail, and digital networks, than the average for other developed countries. So while Germany was selling the world's best cars, its own digital highways were full of potholes.
All of this has led to a new fear in Germany, a word you hear more and more often, deindustrialization. It's this deep concern that high energy costs and slowing global demand could force core industries to shrink, or maybe even leave the country, which would fundamentally change the economy for good.
This all raises a huge question and brings us to Germany's next chapter. The old model, the one that worked so well, is clearly not enough anymore. So, can this powerful economic engine actually be retooled for the challenges of the future?
The to-do list is, well, it's daunting. Germany has to rapidly find new sustainable energy sources. It needs to find new customers for its goods so it's not so dependent on one or two countries. It has to finally make those massive investments in digital transformation and public infrastructure. And on top of all that, it's facing the huge challenge of an aging workforce.
So, the really crucial takeaway here is this. The very formula that made Germany an economic powerhouse for 20 years is now the source of its biggest problems. What worked in the past is just no longer a guarantee for the future. The country now has to find an entirely new formula for success.
Ultimately, Germany's journey is a really powerful lesson for any country. It shows that even the strongest economies can't afford to stand still. The challenge isn't just about fixing a recession, it's about fundamentally reinventing what it even means to be a successful economy in this rapidly changing world. If this helped you see how big economic decisions shape our lives, please support the channel by subscribing and sharing your thoughts below. Thanks for watching.